In this video, I'm going to teach students how to better manage and control your negative emotions so you can do better in school, get better grades, and have a less stressed out life. So this was spurred by a bunch of questions on relaxation and stress from a couple of subscribers who wanted more elaborations. I'm going to give you 5 tips, but the spin on this one is that I got these tips from the Book of Joy, which is a book that was made from 2 religious leaders, the Dalai Lama of Buddhist faith and Archbishop Desmond Tutu of Christian faith. So these 2 differing religious leaders teamed up to put aside their religious, arguments and write a book to help the world have more joy and live a better, happier life, regardless of religion. Book I was definitely very curious of for a while, and it has a lot of tips on managing emotions and so forth. So I finally finished it, and let's just get started. So tip number 1, let's touch on loneliness first, because that's a topic that's often covered in the book. Now, how is both of these figures able to still remain happy and never lonely, even though oftentimes they're isolated from everyone to pray or meditate for hours or days? Well, these people really focus on the common thread that they have to humanity or to their faith or to their organization. And through that, they always feel connected to people regardless of their physical situation. I think this is really crucial for anyone who's working or remotely and studying remotely. I don't think the current quarantine is going to end across the world anytime soon. Even in developed countries like the U.S., given the rate of vaccines slowly rolling out and the population, we may be here for another year learning remotely. So of course that loneliness is something that a lot of people are struggling with for the first time, and it's a key part of your mental health, your mental agility. Just like your physical fitness, you have to have your mental fitness on point. So that's one exercise you can use. Of course, check out the book itself because it has a lot more details on these tips. Okay, tip number 2 is on stress and anxiety. Obviously, a lot of students are very anxious for various reasons, including the fact that, well, quite frankly, people really don't have a lot of hope to get good grades, especially when you're taking a lot of advanced courses and everyone else in class is very competitive. So of course, I can guess where a lot of the anxiety and stress is coming from. How are you going to get straight A's or even B's, or even C's, depending on the student? So basically, the book mentions kind of focusing on whether or not that outcome is likely to occur in the first place. Maybe are you stressing too much about something that may not even occur? Like, what do you think it's actually going to occur? Or the way they phrase it is, are you definitely sure that outcome is even going to happen? And then, if it does happen, what can you learn from this? How can this be a positive opportunity? So, those things definitely get you thinking in a different way, which can definitely create opportunity or at least change your feelings about the event, even if it, happened, which it may not. Okay, tip number 3 is on disaster situations. So let's just say, I'm assuming it's, you fail a test, or you do poorly in school, you get a bad grade, or something happens. Maybe your parents get upset. But is that situation something that you can use to learn to empathize with people around the world? The Dalai Lama says, can you find something out of this that is a rewarding learning experience, something that you can use to, relate to those struggling around the world, And in the book, of course, he gives examples not related to school, but through death or hardship. Like if you lose your job, or you're starving, or you get into a horrible car accident and you're in the hospital, or some illness happens. He says, now you can, it sucks, but is there something you could learn from this? And one thing could be, now I have empathy for all the suffering of people all across the world, thousands, maybe even millions, who have or are going through similar hardships. And it can really give you a different perspective on life, on how tough it is for some people, which can give you a better sentiment about your situation, especially when you go back to normal. Tip number 4, gratitude. So they talk about gratitude a lot, especially when it comes to like envy or jealousy, but gratitude can be helpful even if you're just stressed or you need to relax. Oftentimes what I found from the book is a lot of it's about focusing and perspective shifting. So of course, when you're stressed or you need to relax or you're anxious, your focus is on yourself and your own problems rather than maybe the world's problems, others suffering. So if you can shift that focus to something else, like what positives you have, what you're so grateful to have in this world, like your family, food on the table when there's people starving, whatever it is, money to, pay for luxury things like video games and stuff, toys, clean water, that can definitely help shift your mind and your sentiment, which is great. Just think about it. These are people who, the two authors are these religious leaders who are revered across the world, and everyone wants to take a picture with them. But when you look at their life, it's very basic. They don't have millions of dollars. They're spending most of their days just meditating and praying, and they live a very simple life. And so if they can be happy, then you can be happy, regardless of whether or not you get straight A's and get into like an Ivy League and make some fancy salary at a management consultant company or whatever you're pursuing. It's a great reminder that maybe that's not necessary for happiness. And then tip number 5, they talk about a lot of emotions, but I think the most relevant one here is anger. So they have a bunch of tips on anger. I'm going to pull out one of the most effective ones. They said, if you're angry, like maybe you're angry because you did poorly in school, or because someone was distracting you at home or at work because you're trying to study, or you're angry at yourself because you got distracted and watched too much anime when you should be studying for school. Anger, they have a bunch of strategies, but they mostly ran along the theme of ask yourself, is this effective? Is this really effective for your goals? And usually the answer is no, no, this anger is not really helping me much. And so if that's the case, change it. If it is helpful, channel that. He gives the example of how he was commuting to some place to give a speech. I think this one was the Archbishop Tutu, although it could have been the Dalai Lama who said this. But he was commuting to this place to give a speech or something, and he saw this guy driving next to him. And of course the traffic's terrible. The guy gets really pissed off because the car in front of him stops early, which forces him to hit his head on the steering wheel. He gets so angry that he hits his head numerous more times on the steering wheel, almost out of a kind of backlash. And so, this let's just say it was the Dalai Lama. The Dalai Lama saw this, and he got thoughtful about it. He was like, isn't that peculiar? He was so angry that he hit his head on the steering wheel that he inflicted more of the suffering that he was upset that happened by doing the same thing to himself. So oftentimes, he used this as an analogy. Oftentimes, we kind of shoot ourselves in our own foot by making ourselves suffer more for something that we didn't need to suffer for in the first place. So how can you apply this to your school life? Be resourceful. you need to develop that resourcefulness, so I don't feed you every little tip. Like, you have to be able to figure out ways yourself. But I'll give you one example. Maybe you're in school and you're pissed off that you didn't study as much. I mean, you could just sit there and remain angry. Maybe that even causes you to eat junk food. And that's not helpful. So once you realize that's not effective, you can tell yourself, okay, what can I do for the next test? Well, maybe it's just studying using, that technique I showed you, the technique of just doing 10 minutes a day of studying. And that adds up over a week, over many weeks, to a lot of studying. And now you're doing more than you did before, because maybe you did 0 minutes of studying. So there you have it. Hopefully it helps, and may the force be with you. That's a Star Wars reference. I'm hoping you've heard of Star Wars, but anyhow, like, subscribe, and comment.